So today we're going to talk about our signers' most asked questions. So it'll be an overview of the common borrower questions when you're signing a set of loan docs and how to find the answers. So first, let's overview what our responsibilities are as a signing agent. So first off, signing agents are not allowed to provide advice or give their personal opinions regarding a signer's documents or loan terms. And that makes sense, doesn't it? So if the borrower asks us, what do you think of that interest rate? Do you think it's a good rate? We're not allowed to give them advice or give them our opinion. But we should be able to answer the wheres and the whats concerning their loan terms. I normally say we don't want to answer the whys and the hows. There are some whys and hows that we can answer, and we'll go into some of those in a little bit. But we don't want to try to explain how the lender got that interest rate or why the closing costs are this amount. That's not our job. We can't explain how they get to that point, but we can explain, in general, why certain items are the way they are. So we'll kind of go into the specifics in a bit. And it's really important for you to feel comfortable guiding the signers through the documents and to provide a little general description for each form. That's important. Why? Well, it helps the signers better understand what they're signing, and it makes them more comfortable. And when you have a grasp of the purpose of each document and a little script to say for each one, and to know how to answer the real general questions, it's going to boost your confidence. And that's going to result in a more enjoyable signing experience for everyone involved. When I first started out, the questions were the things that scared me. I didn't know what was going to happen on that signing. I didn't know what they were going to ask. And so every signing was a little nerve-wracking. Once I had all the questions that could come up, which happens pretty quickly, and once I figured out how to answer them, signings became a fun thing. And so now I've done a lot of signings. I feel really comfortable. I kind of have my arsenal of answers for any questions that come up, and I know what to do when I can't answer those questions. I can take any job, and I feel comfortable taking any job, and I look forward to it. It's exciting. So it's important to have a general idea of how to answer the questions. And like I said, know what to do when we can't. So let's get right into the different questions that we find are the most common. Now, the criteria for this is I asked some of our favorite notaries who have done hundreds and thousands of, not hundreds of thousands, hundreds or thousands of signings. And these are the main questions that get asked. All right. So this is a very common one. Is my interest rate fixed? So most signers, most conventional loans are fixed rate loans, right? And borrowers are really concerned about their interest rate being fixed. One of the notaries that I asked called this an old classic, right? This is one of the main questions that most borrowers want to know. And to find that answer, it's relatively quick. You go to the note, most important document, right? When you first go to the signing, you might have 3 documents at the top of the set to try to expedite the signing, and the first one might be the note. So you want to direct the signers to the note. How do you know it's a fixed rate note? Look at the very bottom of the form. If it says multi-state fixed rate note, that's the type of instrument or document it is, and that means that it's a fixed rate. You can also check the closing disclosure, or CD. We call that the CD. So at the top right of the form, it'll have the loan information, and under product, it'll tell us what kind of rate it is. For this loan, it's a fixed rate. Also, under the section loan terms, it'll have interest rate, and then to the right, it says, can this amount increase after closing? If it says no, it's a fixed rate. So like I said, it might be advantageous to put your note, your closing disclosure, and your settlement statement at the top of the loan set at the actual closing table, because these are the documents that we'll have the most questions about. And so if we get those questions answered right away, the rest of the signing generally goes by pretty quickly. All right, what about, do I have an impound account? So first off, let's talk about what an impound account is. It's sometimes known as an escrow account. Basically, it's an account that holds funds to pay the signers property taxes, homeowners insurance, sometimes private mortgage insurance, also known as PMI, or HOA dues, flood insurance. Basically, the lender takes the cost of these items and spreads them over 12 months, and that amount is added to the mortgage payment. So instead of the borrower having to pay these items directly themselves once or twice a year, the mortgage company will pay them in the borrower's behalf using the funds in that impound account. And they do this to ensure that those bills are paid. Many lenders require an impound account. Some have it be optional, but basically it's the borrower paying their property taxes and insurance using the impound account. And the mortgage servicer will manage that account and pay these bills in the signer's behalf. With borrowers, they either love an impound account or hate it and want to have that money themselves and pay it themselves. I personally love it because I don't want to have to pay those myself. They're big amounts. So if they're asking, do I have an impound account? What you're going to want to do is direct the signers to the closing disclosure, the first payment letter, or if there is a impound account disclosure present. So let's look at that. All right, here's the closing disclosure to the left. Under the projected payments section, it'll have the estimated escrow, which the amount can increase over time because property taxes, homeowners insurance may change, and it'll have it here. And then right below where it says estimated taxes, insurance, and assessments, it says this estimate includes, and it'll check what is involved. And then where it says in escrow, it'll either say yes or no. So if it's yes, then they have an impound account. Also on the first payment letter, which is to the right, it'll show whether that information or those accounts are impounded. So what we see right here, that this borrower has an estimated taxes and hazard insurance impound into that impound account right here. So that's how you can know, and that's how you can tell the borrower. Okay, so to the right here is an initial escrow account disclosure statement. So if the borrower has an impound account, this form will be present. Basically, it shows what that account is going to look like for the next year. So how much every month is deposited into it, and then when those disbursements are going to be made to pay the property taxes, it looks like in November and in March of next year. So that's what this form is. At the very bottom, there's an amount there of $900 on this form, and it says cushion selected by the servicer. So the signer might ask, what is the cushion for on the impound account? So the lender may require a cushion for the impound account as a safeguard to cover unanticipated disbursements. And typically that amount is around 2 months worth of escrow payments. So upfront, they may require the borrower to provide a cushion to pay for any unexpected increases in property taxes, homeowners insurance, or other escrow items. And it also depends on when the borrower is refinancing. For example, if they're refinancing and the next month property taxes are due, they might add more to the cushion in order to cover that charge. Or the borrower might actually have to pay property taxes in order to fund the loan based off of when they're refinancing their home. So that's what that cushion is. And in some states, I believe the max that they can put in the cushion is 2 months worth of escrow payments. Okay. Next up, will I get my previous impound account refunded back to me? Okay, so they're refinancing their home. Their previous loan had an impound account. They may ask, will I get that previous account refunded back to me? The answer is yes. If there are funds left in their previous impound account prior to refinancing, the borrower will get a refund of the proceeds in that account. The refund will be given to them within 30 days of the previous lender receiving the payoff from the new lender. So if they ask that, you can standard say that within 30 days, they'll receive a refund from their previous lender. Okay, what about this next one? Why is the payment amount listed on the note lower than I expected? Okay, so you're getting to the note and they see the amount there. So under section 3B, amount of monthly payments, it has that total. So what if they see it and they say, that's lower than what I expected? That doesn't look right. Well, the reason why is that the amount of the monthly payment listed here on the note, this is only principal and interest of the loan. If the borrower's property taxes and homeowner's insurance are impounded, then this will not be reflected on the note. You're going to want to see the closing disclosure or the first payment letter for the full monthly payment amount. Oh, right here. So this is just principal and interest, that $1,300 amount. If you look at the closing disclosure, it'll have the principal and interest plus the escrow account or impound account, and that'll have the total there. So that's generally why they might ask that, and this is how you can explain how that works. All right, next up, when is my first payment due? This is a very common one. Again, the note, it's your best friend, check it out. Section 3A will tell them when the first payment is due. So this loan in particular, it's due on the 1st of July. They might also ask if there's a grace period for my monthly payments. So what if they say, well, I can't pay it on the 1st because I get paid on the 5th every month. Does that work? Well, again, direct them to the note, section 6A. It says late charge for overdue payments. And it says here that if the note holder has not received the full amount of any monthly payment by the end of the 15th calendar day. So most conventional loans, the borrowers have from the 1st to the 15th to make their payment, and they're not charged a late fee until after the 15th. So there is a grace period for most conventional loans. All right, what if they ask, can I pay the loan off early? Or if there's a prepayment penalty? Again, check out the note, section 4 of the note, borrower's right to prepay. So again, most conventional loans will have the borrower have the ability to make a prepayment or pay it off early. So you can direct them to that information right there. All right, what if the borrower has a question? They don't, it's a question you can't answer, and they don't have their loan officer's information or their escrow agent or their broker's information. So sometimes a contracting company might have that information for you. Some of our favorite loan officers will provide that to us and say, please give this to the notary. That way they have it at the signing if there's any issues, but that doesn't always happen. But the closing disclosure is an awesome document. Check out page 5 and you'll see the contact information. So sometimes those are company numbers where you have to dial an extension to get a hold of someone. Sometimes they're the loan officer's cell phone number or a direct line. So check out that. You'll see the lender. Sometimes there's a broker, depending on the type of loan, and the settlement agent, which is typically the escrow company. So you can reach out to them using that information. So you wouldn't want to stop the signing because we don't have that contact info. Check out the closing disclosure. It's most likely there. Okay, so what if they say, you're going through the documents and they say, didn't I sign this already? So there may be some documents that the borrower has previously signed. These are called pre-disclosures. So when you get a loan, you sign a lot of documents prior to even that final loan doc signing. So there may be documents that you e-signed or even maybe physically signed. If the lender provides the forms that request a signature, get a signature. A wet copy of the document is going to need to be signed on the day of the signing. If the form has an electronic signature present, have the borrower wet sign that form again, just to be safe. You never know if that's what they want. This is an example. So this was an e-signed form, and we had the borrower sign just right above the line and date it again for the day that they signed. So sometimes those will be present. All right, what about, do I have to sign as the signature line shows? And this is a question we get all the time. And it really depends on the borrower and their signature. So we have two samples of two different signatures. If the borrower's signature is cursive, so, or you can make out each word, each name, you can see each name or maybe the initials, then they really must sign as the signature line shows, and they must do it consistently. So in this case, we can see that this is Alfonso Gregory Morris, right? If he put Alfonso G. Morris, we might need to tell everybody involved, let them know, check their ID and see have they ever signed as Alfonso Gregory, because if they have, then we really need them to sign as the signature line shows. Some borrowers will refuse. You'll hear where the borrower will say, I never ever sign with my middle initial ever. You want to make sure to cover your back by letting everybody know and check their ID to see if that is accurate, because there is a sample of the signature there. But if, once again, if the signature is cursive and you can tell what they're signing, then have them sign as the signature line shows and consistently watch them. I had a signer a few months back who, her name was like Kelly and the middle initial was A, and she would sign sometimes without the middle initial and sometimes with it. And I had to keep going back and having her add that middle initial. So it's really important, if you can tell what letters and names are there, to have them sign as shown on the signature line. But if the signature is more like the one to the right, which is kind of a symbol, right? We can kind of, I mean, you can't really see what that's supposed to be. So if the borrower's signature is a symbol or a scribble, then they can proceed with signing with their symbol. It must be consistent though. So they can't sign one form as cursive and then the other as the symbol. If they're signing as the symbol, have them sign that way throughout the set. We've seen several times where the notary most likely told the borrower to sign exactly as the signature line reads, and they never sign that way. So they actually just print their names out. You don't want them to do that. If they have a symbol and that's how they always sign, let them sign with the symbol consistently throughout the loan docs. Okay, what about this one? This one might kind of stump a notary, so it's good that we're covering it. How much money is coming back to me, or how much money do I have to provide to escrow? So sometimes in order to close the loan, there are funds that are due from the signer. So the signer actually has to pay money in order to close the loan. And other times the borrower is getting money back when the loan funds. So if in order to know how you can tell, check the bottom of the settlement statement, or that we call it the SS. That's going to show what applies to the signer. So in this sample right here, it says subtotals due to the borrower. So in this case, they're getting $813 back. Now, these figures on the settlement statement are still estimated and subject to change until the loan funds. I've refinanced where I've owed money at the time of signing, and then by the end of the funding of the loan, I'm getting money back. So there's still some estimate, but this is going to give you, this form, the settlement statement, is going to give you the most accurate estimate. And it'll tell you right there at the bottom whether money is due to the signer or from the signer. So along those same lines, this is another common one. Why is the cash to close due to or from me different on the settlement statement than it is on the closing disclosure? So sometimes these forms don't match perfectly. The trick is this: the settlement statement is the most up-to-date breakdown. This is the document that is given to us from Escrow. They're in charge of pooling the latest payoffs. They're in charge of calculating the per diem, getting the property tax and homeowners insurance information. So the settlement statement is the one that is the most accurate. Now, again, it's still subject to change, so these figures may change, but if the borrower is questioning which one is accurate, the closing disclosure or the settlement statement, always refer them to the settlement statement. That's the most up-to-date form. All right, next up. They already have my bank account information. Why do I need to provide it again? So you're signing a set of loan docs, you get to the instructions for funds due to borrower. So if the borrower is getting money back at funding, the signer needs to decide how they want the money. They can have a check mailed to them, or they can have the funds wired. Over a certain amount, wire is preferable for most people, right? More secure than having a check mailed to you. So if the borrowers want that money wired into their account, they'll need to provide their bank account information to escrow or title. So they may have already provided this to the lender, but it's typically escrow and title. That's the one that disperses the proceeds. So they'll need to provide this information to them. So remember, escrow and lender are typically separate companies, right? So they may have provided it to their lender, but escrow is going to need it. So make sure to have the borrower fill this information in. And because of the increase in fraud, this needs to be filled in the presence of a notary. Even if it doesn't require notarization, escrow policy may require that. For example, this happened this week. We've had a few issues with this form this week, at least that I've dealt with. The one example was the borrower filled in the bank name, account number, routing number, but they forgot to add the account holder's name. They must put the name exactly as it appears on the account there. If this is not filled in, escrow is going to ask us to have the notary go back out and get this recompleted and signed in front of them. It's that important. You can imagine the fraud that can happen with putting the wrong bank account numbers in there, right? So this form is really critical. And if the borrower fills it in and there's money coming back to them, it must be completed correctly. So make sure to fill this whole thing in, including that account holder's name, which is always missed. All right, what about this one? This is one that everyone has a hard time with initially. What if the borrower gets to the preliminary change of ownership, or PCOR, and says, how do we fill this in? So let's talk about what this form is, though. This is a form that accompanies a deed. So a grant deed, quitclaim deed, warranty deed. It's recorded alongside the deed. It describes why the transfer shown in the deed is tax exempt. And we know that this form looks intimidating, but it looks more intimidating than it actually is. Only part one needs to be completed. And then at the bottom of the second page, it needs to be signed. So for refinances, only part one needs to be completed. And to get the answer to one of the options in part one, you need to reference the deed attached. So let's look at an example. So here's a deed and a PCOR. The deed here is Eli and Virginia, husband and wife, grant the property to Eli and Virginia as trustees. So this is an example of a property being taken from individuals and transferred into a trust. So it's important to familiarize yourself with part one, and you can help the borrower fill this out. So out of all these options, the right option for a trust transfer is option K. This is a transfer to or from a revocable trust for the benefit of the transfer. So you'd put yes there. You can just check no to all the other ones and yes to that one. And then again, you don't need to fill out 2, 3, or 4. You just need to sign at the bottom. Now, there's really only one signature line. So you can have both signers sign or one sign below. But technically, really only one needs to sign this form. They're not going to kick it back if both signers don't sign it. Just a little tip there. Let's look at another example. So the real key to filling out this form, other than knowing that you don't need to fill out parts 2 through 4, you just need to get to know part 1, is looking at the deeds and figuring out what the purpose of the deed is. That's how you understand how to fill this form out. So here's another grant deed. This is a transfer from William White and Wendy White, husband and wife, to Peter D. White and Sylvia White, husband and wife. Now, you also might have to ask the signers what the relationship is if it's not obvious. So in this case, A. William and Wendy are parents, and Peter is their son. So this is a transfer between parents and children. So the PCOR would be filled out in section 1, section C. This is a transfer between parents and children. So you might need to ask the signers what the relationship is if like I said, if it's not obvious, and familiarize yourself with the options in part 1 transfer information. The deed will tell you what the right answer is. And most of the time, it's actually really relatively straightforward. So again, to sum up, if you don't know how to fill this in, you really only need to fill in part 1. And you reference the deed and ask the signers what the relationship is, and then find the most appropriate answer in transfer 1 or the part 1 transfer information. And again, just 1 signature is needed on the 2nd page. So that's how you fill in that form. Okay, next up, will my loan be sold to a different lender? This happens all the time. Borrowers want to know if the loan is going to be sold. Maybe they refinanced with one lender and they're hoping to keep that lender because they love that lender, but the lender might sell it. And so they ask you. So the fact is that federal banking allows financial institutions to sell mortgages or to transfer the servicing rights to another institution. Borrower consent is not required for lenders to sell mortgages. It's the truth of it. Borrowers don't always like that, but it's just the way it is. Some lenders do not intend to sell the mortgage or transfer the servicing rights to another institution, but they reserve the right to do so, right? You never know what happens with big corporations. They might be sold, they might merge with another bank. So they don't ever say that we will never sell your loan. I've never seen that. I have a story of a signing that I went on a few months back, and I thought it was going to be a real easy one. I thought, oh, I'll be out in 30 minutes and I'll get right back to work. I was there for 2 hours because the borrower really wanted to see a point on the loan docs that said that this lender will never sell the loan. And I knew that they weren't going to get that, but they saw somewhere in those pre-disclosures that they signed online that they said that the lender wouldn't sell it. So I told them that the lender has the right to sell it, but generally this lender doesn't intend to. And so she didn't like that. So she called her loan officer. Loan officer said, I don't think we have that. Long story short, I ended up leaving. It did not sign okay, but I got a call back later on. And she said, okay, please come back. I'm ready to sign. What I wanted doesn't exist. But the reason why I said that was because there was a note in the pre-disclosures that said that this lender does not intend to sell the loan. So they very rarely say they'll never sell it, but they say they don't intend to. They always reserve the right to sell it though, if they want. I've had another borrower, there's sometimes a page that says that the lender will, has the right to sell or transfer the servicing rights. And the borrower said, well, I'm not going to sign it, so they can't transfer it. That form isn't asking for their consent. It's just letting them know that that's something that the lender might do. So there may be maybe hard money loans or smaller lenders that might say that they don't sell the loan, but for the most part, they reserve the right to do so. So you can simply explain to them that, you know, that the laws allow them to sell or transfer the servicing rights, and that there really isn't any consent involved. That's something that they're allowed to do. All right, so to wrap it up, here are some other questions you might get. I feel like you get these all the time. Do people ever sit here and read everything? You'll get borrowers who say that. Now, you can honestly share your experience, but I would be careful not to talk negatively about other signers to your current signer, because they might think, oh boy, what are they going to say about me? So just in general, it's good to be positive, right? And for those that were at our class last week or watch our video on YouTube, we talk about how to be a favorite with the signers. And one way is by never talking negatively about other signers to your signers. There may be some funny anecdotes you have or stories, but be careful not to be negative about other signers, or to make the signers feel like you're waiting on them. If you have, I've had a signer, for example, who really did try to read everything. And he said, you know, do other people do this? And even though in my head, I was frustrated because what normally takes 45 minutes was going to take 3 hours. And I had other signings, but I made sure not to make him feel bad for feeling like he needed to read everything, right? So every signer is different. They're not all created equal. So you want to give them respect and dignity. And what about how long have you been doing this? That's a really common question too. They'll ask how long you've been doing loan signings. Now, if you're brand new, I think it's important not to tell them that you're brand new. This may concern them. So and this has happened even this week. I'll give you an example. So I had a notary. This was probably his 3rd loan signing. And he told the borrower that. Now he shipped the documents and FedEx lost the docs. They opened in transit and now they're lost. Now, FedEx will not do anything about that. They're just like, well, they're lost. It is what it is. So we called the borrower, we had to get it re-signed, and the borrower called me back last night and she was like, I was concerned because he said he was new at this. And I had to explain that this actually wasn't the notary's fault. This was FedEx just got lost in transit. It happens. But you see what I mean. The notary said this was their first signing, and it made the borrowers nervous that something was going to happen. Now, something did happen. It wasn't our notary's fault, and he's being super cool, getting it fixed. Very positive guy. But that's the concern I have with saying, oh, this is my first signing, or I'm brand new to this. It may concern them. So you don't want to lie, but maybe instead you can say something like, I just started doing loan signings this year. Or you can tell them how long you've been a notary. Maybe you've been a notary for many years, but this is just your first shot doing loan signings. So I wouldn't go into specifics. I wouldn't say, well, you're my third signing or you're my first signing. I wouldn't do something like that. Be kind of general. The reason why is you just don't want to concern them. You don't want to lie, but avoid making statements that make the signers feel like you're not qualified to do the job. That's my advice. When I first started out, I think I said, I've been doing it since I started this year. And then maybe I talked about the experience I have in it, though, with my mom being a notary for so long and us running a signing company. So if you've had a lot of training, you can let them know. You can tell them how you've been mentored, but you don't really owe that to them, right? So just be simple. Don't lie, but also don't say anything that might make them be concerned with their loan docs, right? All right, let's go over some tips for signers' questions. So if a signer has a question about the whys and hows that you're not entitled to answer, so questions about how the lender got to a certain term, you want to provide them with the contact information for their loan rep and encourage them to reach out to them for the answer. So if they're concerned about a certain fee and why it is that way, and they thought it was going to be something different, that's not something you want to touch, right? So we can call the loan officer on that one and get the answer directly from their loan rep. And it's very important to inform the contracting company, the person who's hiring you, of what happened on the signing, and if the borrower spoke with their loan rep or had any questions. This is really important, and something that has happened several times this week that has caused some hiccups is that the notary will have the borrower speak to the loan officer. But it's something that we at Coast to Coast really needed to know, because later on down the line, something came up and that information would have solved the problem. So it's really important to keep your signing company in the loop. That might be your first call. If it's a question you're not sure of how to answer, call the signing company, see if we can help you. If we can't, we'll direct you to call your loan rep, but keep the signing company in the loop, or whoever's hiring you. If it's directly from an escrow agent or a real estate agent, make sure to keep that person in the loop. Whoever's paying you, that's the person you're accountable to, right? And again, if you're unsure of the answer, it's best not to presume or guess. You don't want to give the borrower the wrong information unintentionally. And like I said, call the signing company, call the person who hired you. When I first started out, if there were questions that I couldn't answer, I didn't make a big deal out of it. You don't need to be embarrassed. I just said, well, I'm not allowed to answer that, or I can't answer that, but let's call someone who can. And it's just simple as that. You can have a lot of confidence in saying that. And remember, when you're working with Coast to Coast, we're here for you. You can email us. Our main email is office@c2csignings.com, or email us through the platform. That's probably the fastest way to get a hold of us, because we have a large team of people waiting to answer your emails. Or you can call us. So 866-435-6906 is our number.